Somewhere inside the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem, the lights were warming up, microphones were being tested, and the crowd was waiting for a voice that had moved millions. It was June 30th, 1995. The Whispers were celebrating 30 years of music, and one special guest was expected to steal the night, Phyllis Hyman. But she would never walk onto that stage. Earlier that afternoon, inside her New York apartment, Phyllis was found unconscious beside a heartbreaking note that read, "I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are." Hours later, one of soul music's most powerful voices was gone forever. She was only 45 years old, just 6 days away from her birthday. And the most haunting part? The final album she had completed before her death carried a title no one could ignore: I Refuse to Be Lonely. What pain was hidden behind that unforgettable voice? What secrets did fame never heal? Stay with us, because this story is deeper than anyone imagined. Phyllis Linda Hyman was born on July 6, 1949 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the eldest of 7 children. Her father, Philip, was a World War II veteran. Her mother, Louise, worked as a waitress at a local nightclub. The family later moved to Pittsburgh, to the St. Clair Village neighborhood in the South Hills section of the city, and it was there that Phyllis grew up listening to the music that would define her own artistic identity: James Brown, Nina Simone, Minnie Riperton. Voices that carried something larger than melody, voices that carried lived experience and could make a listener feel it in their body. She discovered what her own voice could do early. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, and strikingly beautiful, and the combination of her physical presence and her vocal power made her someone you could not look away from the moment she walked into a room. She sang in church. She won a music scholarship. She studied while simultaneously training to become a legal secretary, as if she were hedging her bets against a future she hoped would choose her but was not yet certain of. It chose her. She turned professional in 1971, performing with cover bands across New York City, building reputation through consistency and craft rather than a single breakthrough moment. Then, producer Norman Connors heard her, and so did Roberta Flack and Jean Carn, and the verdict among people who knew what they were listening to was immediate and unanimous. This voice was exceptional. This woman was something rare. Connors brought Phyllis into the studio to record a version of the Stylistics classic Betcha by Golly Wow, and the recording announced her to the world of serious soul music listeners in a way that nothing she had done before could match. She signed with Butter Records and released her self-titled debut album in 1977. When Arista Records absorbed Butter, she transferred to the new label and began a run of albums that established her permanently in the upper tier of American soul and jazz vocalists. Somewhere in My Lifetime, You Know How to Love Me, Can't We Fall in Love Again? The jazz vocalist Nancy Wilson once said that of all the talents she had known over the years, she considered Sarah Vaughan and Phyllis Hyman to have the greatest voices, the greatest instruments, the greatest pipes that she had ever encountered. 2 names. That was the company Phyllis kept in the minds of those who truly understood what she was capable of. In 1981, she made her Broadway debut in Sophisticated Ladies, the musical revue built around the music of Duke Ellington. The production ran for 2 years. She received a Tony Award nomination for Best Performance by a Featured Actress in a Musical and won a Theatre World Award for Best Newcomer. On stage, she was magnificent, commanding, emotionally present, technically flawless. The audience felt everything she intended them to feel. That was always her gift and always her burden at the same time. She could not separate herself from the feeling. When she sang about loneliness, she was not performing loneliness, she was sharing it. And she was genuinely, deeply, chronically lonely. She had married her manager, Larry Alexander, in 1978. The marriage lasted only a few years before ending in divorce, leaving behind no children and, according to those who knew her, the beginning of a sustained and compounding emotional isolation that would define the rest of her life. She described the reality of her romantic life with a bluntness that was characteristic of her. Being a woman in this industry, she said in a 1994 interview, is very lonely. There is no such thing as a male groupie, at least not when she would date. The men who surrounded her were not there for the reasons she needed them to be. The kind of partnership that could have studied her, the ordinary domestic warmth that her sister Jean later said she believed would have helped her cope with the pressures of the business, that never arrived and never stayed. So she turned to what was available. The alcohol came first, then the cocaine, and the two together began doing the slow, destructive work that substances do on minds that are already struggling to maintain equilibrium. By the mid-1980s, her therapist, Dr. Portia Hunt, had spent enough time with her, observing the extreme highs, the devastating lows, the cycles that played out over weeks and months, to give what was happening inside Phyllis Hyman a clinical name: bipolar disorder. A diagnosis that explained the patterns but did not immediately change them, because diagnosis and treatment are not the same thing, and Phyllis was not yet ready to accept the treatment that was being offered. In 1986, Dr. Hunt finally convinced her to enter treatment. She came out of it with what people described as a new outlook. Sobriety gave her clarity and energy, and she channeled both into her music. She signed with Philadelphia International Records, the legendary Philadelphia label founded by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, and in August of that year released Living All Alone. The title track climbed to number 12 on the R&B charts. The album sold nearly 500,000 copies. It was the music she had always been capable of making, finally in the hands of people who understood what her sound required. The irony was that the song she sang most convincingly was the one that described her own interior life most accurately: Living All Alone. A song about heartbreak and isolation, sung by a woman who knew heartbreak and isolation from the inside of it. Audiences recognized the authenticity and responded to it. But the performance of pain and the healing of pain are not the same thing either, and Phyllis was performing what she could not yet heal. Her career continued building. In 1991, she released The Prime of My Life on Philadelphia International, and it became the biggest album of her career. Don't Want to Change the World became her first #1 R&B hit and her first Billboard Hot 100 entry. The album was certified gold by 1992. At 42 years old, Phyllis Hyman was finally having the commercial breakthrough that her talent had always deserved. And then, the world fell apart around her. In 1993, within the span of a single month, her mother died, her grandmother died, and a close friend died. 3 losses compressed into 30 days. For a woman already fighting bipolar disorder, already managing depression and addiction, already carrying the weight of sustained loneliness and the accumulated disappointments of an industry that had consistently undervalued her, 3 deaths in a month was not something that left room to breathe. It was something that took the air out of the room entirely. The years between 1993 and 1995 were marked by exhaustion. She performed at AIDS benefit concerts and visited patients in hospitals, showing up for other people's suffering while her own was mounting beyond what she could bear. She had spoken openly about death in the years before she died, not always in clinical terms, but with a directness that people around her later said they should have taken more seriously. She had told people more than once that she believed suicide was a valid choice. They had not known whether to treat that as philosophical commentary or personal confession. They would later understand that it had been both. She had just finished recording I Refuse to Be Lonely. The album was delayed by cost negotiations, by label disputes, by the ordinary grinding indignities of an industry that could not seem to make things easy for her, even at the end. It would not be released until November 1995, 5 months after she died. The woman who had recorded it would never hear it played on the radio.
On the morning of June 30th, 1995, Phyllis Hyman was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater in Harlem that evening. She had professional obligations. She had an audience expecting her. She took sleeping pills and vodka in the bedroom of her apartment at 211 West 56th Street in Manhattan, lay down, and let the decision she had made take hold. Her assistant found her at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She was unconscious, but still alive. An ambulance rushed her to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. The medical team worked on her. At 3:50 in the afternoon, almost 2 hours after she was found, Phyllis Linda Hyman was gone. 6 days before she would have turned 46, hours before the curtain at the Apollo would have risen and the audience would have heard that voice one final time. The note was brief. It said she was tired. It said those she loved knew who they were. It asked God to bless them. A posthumous album was named after the recording she had just completed, "I Refuse to Be Lonely," a phrase that reads now like something between a declaration and a prayer, a woman insisting right up until the end that she deserved what she had never been able to keep. In the years since, Phyllis Hyman's music has found the audience it always deserved. Don't Want to Change the World, Living All Alone, Old Friend, You Know How to Love Me, songs that carry the weight of everything she was trying to say in a world that was not always listening carefully enough. Jazz vocalist Nancy Wilson said it plainly: Sarah Vaughan and Phyllis Hyman, the greatest pipes, the greatest instruments, mentioned together in the same breath, the way their talents always warranted. She was tired, that is what she wrote, and the exhaustion behind those words, the accumulated weight of mental illness and loneliness and addiction and grief, and an industry that gave her gold records but never gave her peace, is something that anyone who has listened carefully to her music has always been able to hear hiding inside every song she ever sang. She was not performing it, she was living it, right up until the afternoon she decided she had lived enough of it.